People who have passed and then been resuscitated, what do you remember seeing? Just before my 18th birthday during the summer after graduating high school, I was tearing around in a three-wheeler with friends. This old trike was not cared for by the owners, but I didn't know that, so I was doing my best to whiz around just as fast as the newer quads I was riding with. I broke off from the group and ended up hitting a slight bump and forcing the pins holding the front axle to the frame to shear in two, thus rendering the trike into two entirely separate pieces. The image in your mind may now be me with my bum falling behind in the main portion of the trike while my front, still grasping to the handlebars in disbelief, is falling forward, causing a rift in my seating position. The handlebars bounced up and struck just below my voice box. I fell to the ground and was promptly run over by the back half of the trike. In shock, I stood and tried to call for help. But as of those of you paying attention may have surmised, I was unable to force air past my voice box and I eventually fell over into a more or less fetal position. They found me and gathered around while waiting for paramedics to arrive. A 15-helicopter flight. I accepted my fate. I was about to meet my end. I told those friends and family around me that I loved them and that my time has come to say goodbye. Once paramedics arrived, I described to them what had happened to me, even though there was no external injury. They, being paramedics, did what they were trained to do and got me on a stretcher and used a bag valve mask in an attempt to get oxygenated air into my body. This failed, as they did not have any inkling that the air had no guidance system and simply filled up my body cavity. Eventually, I was on a helicopter and then I passed out. From here, there are two stories to tell. The one that I experienced and the one that occurred through other people's experiences. My own first. I passed away. As I was fading, I had the realization that the end was imminent and thought, aren't I supposed to see a tunnel and light and all that nonsense? Then it happened. I saw the tunnel and light. Only after I made the realization of what was occurring and connected it to our culturally normative thoughts behind what happened at the time did I see that tunnel. This has led me to recognize how ingrained cultural beliefs are and how far they can be from reality. Memory fades, but this has lasted vividly for many years since its occurrence. As has been mentioned, the feeling of complete oneness with all of existence was my main perception. That the self is not me or I, but rather one as many or all as one. There is actually a Family Guy sketch where they are stuck in purgatory that gives a decent visual example, and it is simply white nothingness. Except nothingness, but simply an all-encompassing light. That was it for me. There was no concept of time or space, just existence, along with the whole of everything, including the number 42. What happened in the living world was this. The chopper took me towards a large urban medical center, 45-minute flight. When the technicians realized it wouldn't make it that far, they turned around and went to the small local hospital. There, a team of surgeons couldn't figure out what was wrong, so one bright young lad decided, in order to save my life, which was quickly drifting away. At this point, my blood oxygen count was well below normal and brain damage was a real possibility, to open my chest and figure it out. There, they found a mess and did a quick fix by sticking a tube in and shipping me off to a different medical center, where I spent the next 6 hours in intensive surgery with a team of doctors who were prepared to get at my collapsed trachea, which would inevitably recoil behind my heart, as the trachea is like a stretched spring inside your chest. Drainage tubes for my lungs were installed, which I still proudly show as Jesus scars, as were a host of balloons to keep my lungs and trachea from collapsing. I spent a week in a coma, and another so doped up that I saw golden retrievers dancing with purple hippos in the ICU. It was an exciting and terrifying hospital stay for the next 30 days. Since my family was told I passed away, would be brain damaged, maybe a vegetable, etc., while I was asleep, you can understand there were, and still are, some strong feelings regarding the incident. However, when I was told I would need a tube in my neck to breathe for the rest of my life and therefore would not be able to swim again, I promptly said, okay, and made up my mind to recuperate, although I was still baked enough to wonder why I couldn't just swim backstroke and keep the tube out of the water. Within 12 months, I was competing in college nationals, always showing off my scars. Story 2. I was hurt in the stomach with a sharp object by my schizophrenic uncle when I was 15 years old. I remember freaking out, lying on the floor and hyperventilating. I tried to crawl up from my basement to call 911, but I was so weak and every time I moved, I started hurting harder. I remember passing out and having the sensation that I was leaving a dark room and moving outside into the sun. I stopped panicking and this feeling of pure contentment settled over me. I was floating over a garden where all the plants were giving off light and I could see a huge amorphous shape above me that was made up of every color in existence, including colors I had never seen before and couldn't possibly describe. The shape seemed familiar, like I was a part of it, and it was beckoning to me and filling me with pure ecstasy and understanding as I looked at it. Then a man who looked an awful lot like Dream from the Sandman comics, which I was obsessed with at the time, walked over to me through the garden and told me that I couldn't go home yet and that it wasn't time. I started weeping, but I was filled with a feeling of understanding, like I knew that I had to go back despite not wanting to. The man had tears streaming down his face, and he took my hand and led me back to my body, which was in an ambulance. My older brother had found me and called 911. 4 years later, I experienced a kind of weak flashback or replay of the feeling I had while looking at the giant shape in the sky while I was on psilocybin mushrooms. It felt like I was intimately connected to every aspect of the universe and that all things that could be known were understood intuitively in that state, like an all-encompassing answer to some divine question. But I couldn't put it into words or symbols of any sort. It was all so obvious in that moment. I felt omniscient and omnipresent, but it was a shadow of the feeling I had during my experience. I didn't have any religion in my upbringing, and I have never been inclined to believe in any sort of organized spirituality, but those two experiences were so vivid and otherworldly that they have convinced me that there are dimensions to existence that are beyond our current ability to grasp in a tangible, scientific way. It felt like I had pressed my face up against some sort of veil and looked through a pinhole at something beyond imagining. People have told me that it was all just a simple product of brain chemistry and that there's nothing spooky about my experience, but I honestly have trouble taking them seriously because none of them had actually experienced anything like it. I challenge anyone to have an experience like this and not come away highly skeptical about our current scientific worldview. There seems to be this undercurrent of feeling among some that we're rapidly approaching a comprehensive and objective view of reality, that science is in its twilight years and we're just tying up some loose ends, but my experience has led me to believe that the cosmos is much more mysterious than anyone but the most original thinkers are giving it credit for. Story 3. I wasn't exactly resuscitated, so this is kind of off the mark. But anyway, I broke my neck last summer while diving into a pool. And not just any old vertebrae. I broke my C1. That's the one at the very top that connects your spinal cord to your skull. Fun stuff. I've been a lifeguard and competitive swimmer for years, diving into water 3 feet deep for practice without batting an eyelash. This time I was diving into 6 feet of water during the break. The lifeguards did nothing crazy or unusual. So I dive in, and next thing I know, my hands aren't up front where they're supposed to be, and all of a sudden there's an awful crunching noise. And if you've ever heard sounds underwater, you know how eerie they are. And I still cringe thinking about it. I hurt my head in the bottom of the pool and it was like time froze. I remember thinking with perfect clarity, I just fell. I just dove into a pool and broke my neck. It was just white everywhere. And I realized that I was sitting at the bottom of the pool. All of a sudden I hear or think, no. And I think that if I can just make it to the top of the pool, I'll survive and no one can stop me. In my head I'm thinking, I'm alive. I refuse to die. Then the white is gone and I'm up at the surface, yelling for one of my friends to come help me to the side of the pool. I was under for 2 or 3 seconds because no one even realized something was wrong, but for me, it felt like I had been down there a long time. I came up and told them I hit my head pretty badly and thought I had a really bad concussion. I began laughing on the side of the pool, walked out using the steps and was about to drive myself to the hospital. At this point, my younger sister, who worked with me, said it would be best if she took me. When we get to the hospital, they put a brace on me but have to send me to a different hospital via ambulance to get a more thorough look at my neck. A couple hours and x-rays later, the doctor comes in smiling, saying that although I did break my C1 vertebrae, I would walk again. Of course, I've had to modify my life and cut out contact sports and running, which have been very, very difficult. But I am alive and well for the most part. It wasn't an overly religious experience for me, but it kind of showed me who I really was. Rather than go ahead and give up and stay at the bottom of that pool, I got to the top, knowing that whatever happened next was going to be rough. Story 4. My sister was hit while she was walking her dogs in our small town in Alaska. The bullet ricocheted around, piercing her in 9 places. Even though we had one of the best Rhodes Scholars doctors in the north at our ER, the only flight out of town was miraculously minutes away from takeoff and we held up to fly her to Anchorage. She passed away on the operating room table. She knows because she vividly remembers everything the surgeon said as she lay on the table. What she later told me is remarkable. She recalls drifting up and into a very bright light. She was no longer in pain and felt compelled to travel into brilliance. It led to an amazing river. Seriously, the look on her face when she describes this place helps me realize that radiant endless joy is not just a possibility, but an eventuality. She describes playing in a river that consisted of pure knowledge. Anything she ever wanted to know was at her fingertips. As she played in the amazing river, she could sense figures in the distant shore. They were our people, she explained. Our family, our animals. We were all waiting patiently for her to finish playing in the river and wade towards them on the shore. Though she was not ready to leave the marvelous river, she knew without being told that they would wait patiently and joyfully. But she never made it to the shore. As she was playing, an amazing thing happened. Seriously, if you could just see the look on her face when she describes this next part, you would laugh with pure joy. The being approached her. She did not know what it was except to describe it as a pure, unconditional, ebullient love. It radiated love. It pulsed with love. And all things diminished before the radiance of that love. The next part makes me chuckle a bit, even though that seems out of place. She said it spoke to her and said that she had to go back, that it wasn't her time. She said, like a little kid, "But I don't want to." When she recounts this experience, she emphasizes that to be in proximity of that being is all there is. She describes it as a completion, a peace, a welcoming. To leave was incomprehensible, but to decline was also incomprehensible. She felt infused with a purpose. Very, very, very reluctantly, she returned to life. She's amazing. They patched her femoral artery and explained that the graft would eventually give. In all probability, she will pass within a few minutes. Living with that sort of Damocles should be terrifying. No, to her it's a promise that she will get it back. Life is what we're here to do, she explains, but after sweet, benevolent, all-encompassing love. With every single breath, my sister has heartbeats from the end, and I've never met anyone who is more alive, fearless. Sometimes, stories like these give me peace, that even after death, we'll still be taken care of. Anyways, while we're in the middle, did these stories make you wonder if you're in the same situation? Don't forget to leave a comment, smash the like button, and subscribe to never miss out on our next thrilling video. Story 5. When I was 8, I learned how to fix small engines. That being said, my dad had an old flathead Briggs & Stratton 5.5 horsepower engine that didn't work. He also had a riding lawnmower that had neither an engine nor blades. He gave me the task of getting the engine running so I could put it on the riding lawnmower and have fun whenever. I was so anxious at school the next day. Well, that day I tore apart the motor and had it running by bedtime. The next day, we had the thing mounted and riding around. Flash forward a few weeks. Me and my sister were out riding when my shoelace got caught in the back spindle. It pulled me off and was dragging me. Mind you, you are only going as fast as it would go. My sister stopped and went in reverse, which caused her to go right onto me. The chain and chain wheel caught my lower right back and an ugly injury followed. I felt the thing roll onto me, and everything went black. I couldn't see, move, speak, or do anything. No pain as well. All I remember was the blackness. After my father got my heart beating again, I remember lying there in pain. I also remember feeling my back and short of breath. Once I was in the ambulance, everything went black. Except this time, I saw myself lying there and the medics shocking me. I felt a hard pull and I was back in myself. A few minutes later, I was at a table with strangers and white all around me. I remember them in a panic, then standing next to my grandmother, who passed when I was 3. She told me she was my Nana. We were there, watching them jolt my heart with tiny round paddles. She kept telling me it was okay. They called my time at 6:06 p.m. Then, all of a sudden, I woke up and I'm all fixed and stapled up. My parents told me I had passed away 3 times. First is for 5 minutes, the second was a little more than 12 minutes. But the last time was astonishing to the doctors. My heart stopped beating for 20 minutes. My parents made them continue jolting my heart. They told me that the doctors kept telling them that I was going to have a 98% chance of being brain dead. I'm 25 years old and as healthy as ever. I'm fully capable of walking as well. Story 6. I had a lot of sleeping pills when I was young, stupid, and heartbroken. I hadn't thought much about the consequences of what would happen afterwards, except that I wouldn't feel this overwhelming pain anymore. The shock of the absolute nothingness I experienced for a few moments gave me enough strength to crawl back to town and get taken to the hospital. The 5 or so minute ride to the hospital was me fighting it with everything I had, and every time I slipped over, the horribleness of it made me fight just a little harder. I was too exhausted to fight it once I got to the hospital. A preacher read me my last rites and I was out. Luckily, I woke up a couple days later. I've been worse off a few times emotionally since then, but taking my life never crossed my mind. There are no emotional troubles that are as awful as that sliver of nothingness I felt. My life is great now, and I'm so thankful I'm alive. I've experienced so many things since then that I can't believe I ever thought I had nothing to live for. When I was coming to, which took a couple days, I hallucinated my best friend trying to get me into trouble but making me get out of bed and saw a little mouse in the corner of the room, which I kept trying to capture. My friend is still alive and I don't have a special connection to mice. It felt very real, but obviously I was hallucinating. I can see how someone might hallucinate about things like deceased relatives and mistake their visions for something more than a brain malfunction. So as far as changing my views on religion, I was fairly skeptical before, but deep down, I hoped angels would whisk me away. Afterwards, I'm pretty sure this life on Earth is all we have. Story 7. I tried to off myself with my dog's leash almost a year ago. All I remember is letting go of the leash since I was holding onto it and just being there for like a minute. It wasn't enough of a shock, so time just seemed to slow down. I felt my heart beat in my arms and legs, and I felt it start to fade. I remember what I've come to call the big empty in my therapy groups as just plain nothingness. It's hard to describe, and some people have managed it quite well, but my description would be void. There's no darkness, there's no you, there's nothing. It's such a complete lack of anything at all that it can't even be described as empty, because that would imply it could be filled with something. It's hard to even realize that it exists because you can't even really perceive it. An experience like mine, I think, is like peering into the void but not going in. Just enough life left to know it's there and not enough demise to be engulfed and completely extinguished by it. My nosy neighbor apparently witnessed me through the window, broke said window, and cut me down within 10 minutes. I was out for 3 days afterwards, but I've since fully recovered. Finished my inpatient and outpatient programs with the Youth Service Bureau, and I've completely turned my life around. The fear of the big empty still haunts me, knowing that I will have to face it again one day and lose. Story 8. A man came and spoke to one of my classes this semester about his experience, and it gave me great comfort. He was kayaking with a friend and ended up flipping over and being sucked under by the current. He was sucked into a pipe underwater, struggled to get out, almost made it, and was sucked back in. He passed out and his friend saw his unconscious body being tossed down the river. This is how he described his experience in the moments he was unconscious. He was in a dark place, almost like a cave, and only the walls were soft and velvety. At the end of this cave, there was a beautiful kaleidoscope of colors. It made it sound similar to a stained glass window, and on the other side of this colored glass, dark figures were passing by. He said that all sense of time was lost, and it felt like his wife and kids would come join him at any minute. He said it was the most comforting and peaceful feeling he had ever experienced. He said that he had a strong sense that God wanted him and everyone there so badly, that you must have to do something pretty terrible to go to hell because he wasn't the greatest of guys before this. His friend was able to catch up to his body and revive him, and he said he now feels a stronger connection with everyone and is grateful to have had this experience. I hope this was calming to some of you, like it was to me. Well, that's it for now, guys. If you're fascinated by the afterlife and curious how people deal when they're the cause of someone else's passing, you gotta check out People Who Accidentally Caused the Death of Someone, What Happened. Story 2 is just sad. See you there.